Hello viewers of African Media, thanks for joining us today on the Pan-African Debate. It's always a pleasure knowing that you're watching us. And today's program, of course, as usual, is focused on discussing on topics that are of interest to the development of the African continent. And today we're discussing African constitutions. And the big question is whether African constitutions are shields of democracy or weapons in the hands of those who are in power. Across the African continent, leaders swear oaths on the constitutions drafted in the name of we, the people. Yet, with each new political crisis, those same texts are stretched, reinterpreted, or simply rewritten to fit the needs of incumbents. The question confronting Pan-African opinion today are stark. Are African constitutions genuine safeguards of democracy, or have they become instruments of political convenience in the hands of those who govern? At independence and again in the wave of reforms in the 90s, African leaders or Africans placed immense hope in constitutionalism. Term limits, separation of power, and entrenched rights were meant to draw a clear line between authoritarian past and the democratic future. But from Harare to Kinshasa, Kampala to Abidjan, a troubling pattern has emerged. Whenever constitutions stand in the way of personal or partisan ambition, it is the constitution, not the ambition, that is asked to adjust. To be fair, constitutions are not sacred scriptures. Societies evolve, and basic laws must sometimes be updated to reflect demographic change, decentralization, new rights, or emerging threats. But the problem here is not that African constitutions change, the problem is how and why they change. Welcome to the Pan-African Debate. Once again, viewers of African Media, thanks for always choosing to be with us. And we, of course, pleased to know that you're watching us out there. And today, of course, in the program, like we indicated earlier, we discussed in African constitutions, whether these constitutions have become weapons in the hands of those who govern, or actually are they shields of democracy as it's supposed to be. We're looking at that topic today. We'll be pleased to discuss that with guest on the program today, and why not you who is watching us out there? We shall have time to equally get your opinion. We will be pleased to know what you think about African constitutions, whether they are shields of democracy or are they weapons in the hands of those who become leaders. Thanks for always tuning in, and welcome once again. Joining us on the program today, we have Professor Akumo Makantoni, who is a Pan-Africanist and a police analyst. Professor, it's a pleasure welcoming you on today's program. Thanks for joining us on today's debate.
Thank you very much, Bidburn. Thank you for receiving me, and I want to greet Africans. It is indeed a pleasure to be here again today for us to discuss issues concerning our continent and to discuss major political issues that concern not just the continent, but particularly Cameroon, which I am a citizen of. And I think that as we get to discuss, it is going to be an educative discussion. Let's get to not only discuss, but let's learn among ourselves.
Sure. Thank you very much, Professor Akumo Makantoni. We have Maître Alex Nzive, who is a legal mind. Maître Alex Nzive, it's a pleasure having you on today's program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Luis. It's always a pleasure to be on your program. I greet you. I greet your technical team. I greet Dr. Akumo, and I greet Dr. Ndi and the wonderful people of Cameroon.
Thank you, Maître Alex Nzive, for joining us. We have equally Dr. Edi Eric. Doctor, it's a pleasure having you on today's program. Dr. Edi Eric, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and my pleasure to always be invited in here. Greetings to all my co-panelists as well.
Yeah,
and
Doctor,
I'm happy to see that we have a sister joining us today.
Yeah, Madam Marilyn Dua, of course, she's there already, I think. Madam Marilyn Dua, it's a pleasure having you on today's program. Welcome to join us.
Thank you so much, Louise. I want to say,
Your volume should not be like that, though.
Well, I think it's a connection issue, and hope to reestablish connections with Madam Marilyn Dua. And I guess our technicians are working on that. Dr. Ejeriga, I think I want to begin with you, and the big question is, African leaders respecting constitutionalism, or are they only respecting the part of the constitution that serves their political survival or interest? When we look at a broader perspective of the African continent and African constitutions, do you think these leaders respect the constitution, or are they only interested in the part that keeps them or makes them to stay in power?
It is unfortunately, we want to certainly start by thanking those African leaders, and I think there's quite a number of them on the continent who have really made a commitment to respect the nature of the constitutions, the disposition of the constitution, especially in the respect of the term limits. And I believe that's where we do have most of the issues with these African leaders. But on the other hand, we want to yell and then shame those African leaders, and there are plenty of them, as you name it, from the southern part of Africa to the northern, from east to west, so many countries where leaders have manipulated their constitutions to remain and stay in power, of course, for their own convenience. When we look at that, we want to say shame, we want to be mad, because in your introduction, you mentioned something, the democratic, what we call the democratic renewal of the 1990s, started well with quite a number of demands from the African populations, especially looking at the longevity that many of those African leaders, were had in power. We talk about, what President Paul Biya, for instance, today. This is the epitome of that. We have President Denis Sassou Nguesso and many of them. So in the 1990s, when African populations were demanding more freedom, and most of the continent, it was a shifting from the one-party state to the reinstauration of a multi-party state system. One of the key things was to limit the term for the president, because that was seen as one of the problems. And what happened is that many of those African countries either amended their constitution to include a clause, right, limiting the presidential term, or simply drafted new constitutions. What we find out is that the heyday of that thought of that period was just the 1990s up to the end of the 1990s. By the 2000, we started seeing so many African countries, again, leaders manipulating, changing the constitution, and claiming that the change of the constitution brings in a new republic, and anything that was a past is a past, and now something new has to happen. We saw that trend starting in the 2000s, and unfortunately, it has been on in many countries. Whereas we thought that it was the leaders of a certain age that were manipulating the constitutions like that to remain in power, therefore keeping the vestiges of the one-party state, we do realize that even those that we can call young leaders, like President Tshisekedi in the Democratic Republic of Congo, are also trying to hide behind these constitutional changes to remain in power. And this is the reason why I say shame on them. So we have a continent that is presenting, two different, pictures here and here in the broad, spectrum. You have a few leaders that are truly respecting the term limits in the country and other dispositions in the constitutions, but you also have many other African leaders that are unfortunately manipulating the constitution to remain in power, not just to remain in power, but also to do other things that are prescribed that we'll certainly have the time to talk about.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ejeriga. We talk with you, Professor Mark Anthony. We look at African constitutions today. Do you think they protect the citizens, or they protect those who get into office, like incumbents? Professor Mark Anthony, what's your general analysis on African constitutions today?
Thank you very much for that question. It is indeed painful that we are discussing constitutions in Africa, and considering that these constitutions were actually imported with a mindset of actually guiding or let's say making the laws of the nation protect the citizens, and also as a means to guide leadership and governance in the country. But if you look at what is happening today, especially in, I want to use Central African Republic, the CEMAC as a whole, not just the Republic or the nations in Central Africa, you realize that the Constitution is used as a shield, not as a means to protect citizens. It is used to protect politicians, not the citizens. Why? Because it is easy for a leader to get up and determine, let's say, decide to change the Constitution, amend the Constitution to fit their desires, not the desires of the people. And I think that the whole idea of a Constitution is supposed to mainly protect the citizens, and protect the sovereignty of the nation, not just some political hoodlums who have an agenda to not abandon power. They want to use the Constitution to perpetuate their rulership. I prefer that Africans should call whatsoever they are using right now as a means to stay in power as kingdoms. We should rather have kingdoms rather than have democracies that are backed with constitutions that are not useful. Because if an individual thinks he has the capacity to get up any day and change the constitution to fit his desires, then why think that we have a constitution? I'll use Cameroon, for example. I think back in 2008, a constitutional amendment was done that extended the presidential term in office to, in fact, it made it to become a tenure, because the Constitution 1996 amended Constitution of I think 1972 actually made it clear that the president was supposed to be in office for 2 terms in office, but for the sake of perpetuating his mandate in power, they finally did some work in amending the Constitution to remove that clause that says that 2 terms in office, so that they can be re-elected as many times as possible. And that is shameful. It's really shameful. I follow the doctor there who said that it's shameful. It's a shameful situation. And that is, you go to, I think, Uganda has the same thing. I think it is getting funny. Presently in Zimbabwe, they are forcing to do the same thing. And why not Ivory Coast, the same thing? And you start asking questions. What is the purpose then of the Constitution? Is it for the politicians or is it for the citizens? It is clear. You and I, we can actually see that these guys mean business. So they want to protect their leadership. They want to protect their power, not the country. So, but that notwithstanding, if you look, there are also other nations that are doing everything possible to respect the presidential limits in the Constitution, which is something that we should also appreciate. There are, like Dr. Eric said, there are 2, we have in a continent where we have 2 trajectories being taken by different politicians, and we, in one way, asking the question, where are we going to end if the majority choose by the direction of amending constitution? Because if you look at it, majority of amending constitution, I think that following what just happened in the Sahel region, I think we should get to that place where we prefer individuals who have the capacity to lead the country and fix things for the nation, because I think the guys of Sahel are following what J.J. Rawlings did in Ghana. He seized power, fixed his country, built institutions rather than building, focusing on the individuals. When the institutions were well established, he then handed over and brought in democracy. At that moment, Now Ghana respects presidential terms in office and all that, but that is because somebody decided to fix it. And I think we need to do that. We need to fix most of what is happening in Africa right now. We need to fix it.
All right. We actually need to fix it. And there's something you mentioned, which you talk about constitutions being imported. I want to talk with Metro Alex Ndive. Metro Alex Ndive, we look at the African continent today when terms limit do not favor incumbents. What they do is change the constitutions when their mandate expires. Of course, that they are not supposed to run again. They change term limits when their age is out of range. They change the constitution, and this, of course, constitutions which, according to Prof, it's imported. When you look at African constitutions today, do you think it's actually a shield to democracy, or do you think this has become a weapon in the hands of incumbents, politicians, as many, of course, think today?
Yeah, Luis, thank you. I will start by saying we should look at most African countries. Who created the African countries? Not us. This colonial power. So look at it from that dimension. We never created those African countries. And when you look like a country like United States, they had an independence. Britain never gave them independence.
They fought for it.
In Africa, most African countries, they go and exchange flag. France give you independence. Britain give you independence. They decided independent act for Nigeria and other English African countries. So to me, I still look at African countries. We are still in that position that we are not really independent because it was a negotiation. I'll give you an example. When you look at a country, I'll talk Cameroon that I know very well. People like Umnyobe, Felix Mumi, Ernest Wangi, they were fighting for independence like the Americans. But they never, ever succeeded to get to power. They did something in 1955 called La Proclamation. That's the day they gave independence. So you know what happened with France? France made sure they keep them out and they do arrangement. It's not only in Cameroon, other African countries. So at the end of the day, so the constitution have to please the incumbent, because a constitution is a good word. When I look like we say we have a constitution in most African countries. What's a constitution? And I would look at it as imported something, because when you look at Article 65 of the Constitution of Cameroon, it makes it clear the preamble is part and parcel of the constitution. And when you look at it, it's something good to me. It's not imported. General safeguard as well. We are all born equal. That's Cameroon constitution. Freedom from discrimination. That's our constitution. The right to life. That's our constitution. Prohibit slavery, legal and justice protection. You have recognized a person before the law, equality before the law, freedom, no arbitrary arrest. That's our constitution. It's good. I can't say it was imported. The right toward fair hearing and independent hearing in the court, the right to presume innocent. That is Cameroon constitution, which is good. You have, again, individual rights, the right to privacy, freedom of movement, the right to nationality, the right to own a property, your civic rights, political rights, who to associate with, thoughts, religion, and all those things. They are beautiful. But the point is, these things are just literature if we don't have what we call separation of power. Article 37, sub 2 of Cameroon Constitution says, the judiciary shall be independent from the executive and legislative. Then Article 3 again says, the president shall guarantee the independence. So the point is, as Dr. Ndi said, I blame the African leader. I blame us, the people, because the people are sovereign people. We should be the one to be blamed. The great are great because we are on our knees. A constitution is a good word, but they keep on manipulating it. All over African countries, you have seen Chad, their constitution said the leader of the president of National Assembly, Senate was supposed to take over. What happened? Then you see, African Union, they have their constitutive act. They say you cannot make a coup d'etat, but they are selective. It's okay to have a coup d'etat in Gabon. It's okay to have a coup d'etat in Chad, but it is not okay for Traoré to have a coup d'etat. So we are in a system that when I look at it, it is us as a people. Nobody will come and help us because I live in UK. I understand how these people think. They look at their interests. One minister in this country, conservative minister, once said, national interest is more important than human rights. So when we cry these things, look at the country like Zaire, when they call it, when they use this word, Democratic Republic of Congo. When you see somebody using that name democratic, know that is undemocratic. And the rest in your country, you have a party called Democratic something. So they do those things. And to me, a constitution constitution is a window dressing exercise in Africa. What they do, they will tell you, and I'll tell you something that will happen in an African country very soon in their constitution. I won't tell you the name of the country, but you might know. What will happen, very soon there will be a vice president. Some people will say, oh no, it has to be from this area. Then they will change it again and put somebody who is there. They will put a vice president, the person become president. Then when the time comes from this minority to become president, they will change their constitution again. They have been doing it. I will tell you this one. I met this vice president and prime minister of Cameroon, Pambuna and Pafoncha. They were the ones to take over Aijo. They keep you there. When they know the time is coming, they created the position prime minister. Mr. Biya is there. They do it all over African countries. Cameroon is not an isolated case. Then they'll come again and tell you, we have term limit. Term limit, 7 years, that's a long time, 14 years. So they'll calm you guys. When the time come again, oh, the people have said Dimabola, we should change it again. They keep on doing it. It's going to go on forever until the people will say, no, enough is enough. America, if I'm not mistaken, celebrated 200 and something years of independence. The Constitution of America was made by what? A constituent assembly made up of people from all the nooks and crannies. They had 13 colonies first. Then they called it ethnicity. Then you go to France, it was a national constituent assembly elected that they drafted the constitution. In Cameroon and other African countries, they would take one person, my professor Joseph Owona, to draft a constitution. You can't do that. As if this is not enough. The constitution of the Cameroons, they have never sent it for a referendum for the people to approve it. So you see, sometimes we call it constitution. We can call something democratic or constitution, but it's funny because I look at a lot of things in our constitution. They say Article 15. They say what? The members of parliament shall represent the entire nation. They don't represent constituency. So if you come from what? Miami, you'll be representing somebody in Garawa. So you see, they can call it constitution, but those things, they are not constitution for me, because if you look at the freedoms and rights that are in the constitution, in most African countries, they are not there. America, 250 years, they don't just change their constitution like that. You go again to France, General Dals, they don't do it that way. And you come to United Kingdom, they manicata 50 and 1250. That's a long time ago, we are still using it. But in Africa, we just change those things. And that's why I say sometimes I look at African constitution like a window dressing exercise. I look at African constitution like a toilet tissue. Thank you.
Thank you, Maitre Alex Ndive. I want to highlight the quote you made about Henry Kisang, which talks about national interest is more important than human rights. With regards to that, Marilyn Dua, we look at African leaders changing constitutions to favor them. Many believe that they are well positioned to continue running the country because they have a mastery of the country. That's why they change the constitution to, to permit them to run again for office, to permit them to stay longer in office. Do you think we should focus on the fact that national interest is more important than human rights, considering that these leaders believe that they master the country more than any other person? That's why they change constitutions to stay in power. What's your take on that?
This is a politician, and ultimately the role of a politician is to maintain power through whatever means necessary, including the constitution, using it as a tool to maintain power. So I want to continue in the same light like my fellow panelists, in that the African constitution, majority of the African constitutions were handed over to them at independence. As Maitre Alex Ndive rightly said, our nations were created. No African was on the table in Berlin at the Berlin conference when Africa was partitioned for the benefit of Europeans, not taking Africans into consideration, separating people, separating nations into factions that, partitioning for European colonies. So when they were forced to hand over independence because of the tides of change, a false independence, because we were never really independent. They changed colonization to neo-colonization under the guise of independence. Our constitutions were handed over to us. That's why you see that most of the English countries have the British rule system, English law, because it was just basically the English, constitution that they used. And the French countries have the Napoleon, because the African culture and history was not taken into consideration in a lot of these constitutions. So it's one of those things that, again, the African constitution is one of those things that we're going to have to do, is the difficult work that we're going to have to do to liquidate colonization. It's still is the remnants of colonization that we are dealing with. And because they are a joke, really, as my panelist said, people didn't really come to it. It wasn't well thought, it wasn't well planned. It could be an elitist where they take one person to sit and draft without taking into consideration what's going on, without taking into consideration our culture, our history. These are that's why people can just change it as they want. And this again, I'm not an all and doom prophet. I'm not a negative Nelly. This is where there's opportunity for us. Although it's a sham that ultimately we're gonna have to do real constitution for our country. But in the meantime, in this sham within which we are operating, citizens have to take matters into their own hands to become knowledgeable, to get involved. Because if you have a parliament that is representative of the people, where there's a good opposition, then the president cannot come and change the constitution because they'll be challenged. But a lot of us don't get involved. We do empty chair politics. We don't want to engage. And that's why you have the ruling party usually have a majority, and then they can change the constitution like they want to. That's why we are calling on young people. We are calling on people to get involved, to engage, to go for elected office, so that when they come to change these constitutions at will, they meet resistance. Now, as my brother McAnthony said, we want to, or the previous one of the other panelists, we want to encourage people in other countries who, although they were given a colonial constitution, they've been responsible enough to their people, where they have made good changes. Like some of the countries that keep coming up is like Kenya, where they've done really good devolution of powers. You have Ghana, where they have tried to fix their constitution to work for their people. They fix the constitution to work for their people. So we want to commend them and call on all the other African countries to the constitution, to really put it to work for the people and not for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Lindwa, and we'll get back to you, Dr. Eddie Eric. If we have to consider the fact that constitutions are imported or remnants of colonialism, like Ma'am Lynn said, but however, we have institutions that are designed to check and balance. We have the courts, we have the parliaments, but most times these institutions fail to, to stop unconstitutional changes. What do you think is happening, and where do you think the influence of not being able to stop what I should say unconstitutional changes is coming from?
The issues are deep. However, before I answer that question, there are two quick things that I want to mention. In the previous question that you questions that where you asked regarding human rights and national interest, I believe that human rights are national interests. The interest of a country, or if you want, if we reduce the country to a state, a government, the national interests include the safety, the social security of the people, the health of the people, the wellness of the people, the capacity of the people to feed themselves, the capacity of the people to have water and potable water, the capacity of the people to speak freely, the capacity of the people to criticize the government at their own will. All of those elements are part of human rights, and I believe that they are also a key issue in national interest. So My point is, I do not necessarily distinguish between the two of them. This is the reason why all those constitutions that we are talking about make a clear point, and I'm glad that Maitre Alexa, who is the legal expert in here, citing the constitutions, made mention of those elements, right? The human rights that are in there, the right to live in here, the right to do this, the right to do that. All of those things are important, and they are also of national, domestic interest. I wanted to mention that to go with. The second thing I also want to take aim at is the notion of inheritance of those constitutions from the colonial era. Maître Ndiveli just said that he's a master at the University of Cameroon or Douala, probably. Professor Wona, I think he said, was charged with drafting the Constitution. I'm not sure that, Professor Wona necessarily is a part of the Aijo era, for instance. So by saying this, I'm not disputing the idea of inheritance of our political habit, and political behaviors from the colonial era, because the vestiges are still continuing. But I think that we want to be very harsh and very critical of the leaders, the professors who have been charged or were charged with drafting the new constitutions. As I said, in the 1990s, when the second wave or the third wave of democracy or the democratic renewal swept through the African continent, of course, people will mention the La Baule conference that sparked everything, or the fall of the Berlin Wall. But one thing that people always forget to mention, and it's always like that when it comes to Africa, it is the desires of the African peasants, the African masses, the young people, seeing the impact of the structural adjustment programs on our economies. The fact that many of the African economies were failing and massive immigration started on the continent. So many of these issues that people wanted to be free. People wanted to move away from the one-party state. They wanted to have a more say in the management of the political and public affairs. Therefore, the one-party state exploded, multi-party system came, and unfortunately we have what we have. To come back to your questions, regarding the design and then those constitutions, I believe that it is how politics in general is run. And I agree with my co-panelists. The constitutions can be beautifully written, and they are beautifully written with all that we need. Retracing, taking into consideration the history, I give you the example of Côte d'Ivoire. The current constitution in Côte d'Ivoire, though I dispute that, includes the parenthesis of a blood. The tragedy that Côte d'Ivoire went through from 1999 up to 2011 at least, when we supposedly the war was behind us. It includes that. Why? Because the constitution is supposed to be the soul of the people. Many African countries' constitutions, South African and all that, includes, even within the national anthem, right? Some aspect of the history, some aspect of what people went through before they get to where they are to form the nation that they are forming. Therefore, I do believe that it is how we have structured the political systems in our countries. In many of those countries where constitutions are being manipulated, you will see that there is no clear, real separations of a power. There is no real check and balance, number one. Number two, the political power remains heavily in the hands of the executive. Many of those constitutions, indicate that. The head of state, His Excellency, is also the head of the magistrature, he's also the head of the army, he's also the head of the this, he's also the head of the that. Everything is concentrated in that one person's hands. Second reason. Third reason, for the longest period of time, I believe, we have run politics in Africa by taking the cultural diversity that we have in our countries as a liability instead of an asset. Because there is nothing we can do. If Cameroon has more, I don't know how many ethnic groups you have in there, but there is nothing we can do. But it's a beautiful thing. That should be the basis of what we built on. Unfortunately, we have looked at that, as a liability, because such politician will be relying heavily on his ethnic group or regional groups to lead, and we have kept those vestiges up to today. And then fourth element that I want to bring very quickly and close on that question is the people themselves. I agree with whoever earlier says we have to blame ourselves as well. Listen, how many of those citizens who are actually funding every day to find, to make ends meet and find food for their population, for their families, who are those people that are that concerned with what is written in the constitutions? How often the constitution is being taught, vulgarized, popularized, or made known by people, if it is not during election times, if it is not during when leaders seek to maintain themselves in power? The constitution, being the soul of the nation, being the soul of the country, should be something that people rely on, people know at least the basic elements, right, all the time. But we don't teach that. Or if we teach that, we teach it in certain ways. These are, again, my point is, how well are the citizens, the ordinary citizens, aware of what the Constitution is contains, what it shows, and what it represents for them. My last point, Biteng, is one of my professors, who is late now, Professor Seri Baye at the University of Abidjan, always told us the problem of democracy, or the problem of our political systems in Africa in general, is because we don't have citizens. Then we sat back and said, come on now, we are citizens. He said, well, a citizen is not the one who expects any dividends because you go into the ballot box. The citizen is not the one who can clap. Of course, you can congratulate the government for building a road. But when you hear people saying, we clap for such and such a president because he built a road for us, where does he get the money to build the road? It is your own money as citizen. This lack of knowledge, or this political minds that we have in political culture, is also what keeps on perpetuating this problem that we have with constitutions becoming toilet paper, as somebody else said earlier, and constitution becoming something that can be tossed and changed every 3 years dramatically. Biteng, this is what I think I want to say to answer your question. It has more to do with how politics is run, our political behavior. And mind you, last point, you even have some political leaders in opposition who claim that when they come, things will change. I'm still baffled. Not long ago, I met with the leader of the second largest political party in Angola, the UNITA, which used to be actually the military, a military faction. I congratulated them for one thing. Now they have become a political machine and left the Maquis, if I can say, the left the fighting aspect of things. But then I asked him, tell me, you're not in power yet, but what explains the fact that from the opposition, we say all these beautiful things, but once we get into power, the constitution becomes a toilet paper. He gave me his answer, that power can corrupt. I took it, I swallowed it. I don't know if I was able to ruminate over it, but it was a simple answer. What creates that problem? The leaders of nowadays, Tshisekedi was not born in the 1940s to be a child of colonization. Tshisekedi was born after the independence. Why is it muling the idea of having a third term and claim that, if the people wants me to be, to run for a third term, I will do that? No, you yourself, Tshisekedi, want to run for a third term. We think I'll end on that.
Thank you, Dr. Hiziarik. Quite interesting when leaders, before getting to power, they make several promises, and once they get to power, those promises, of course, die down, and the ambition is staying longer in power, and the constitution becomes, just like Doctor said, a toilet paper, and they want to change at any time. Notwithstanding, Professor Mark Antony, we see democracy succeeding in other African countries. I think Madam Marilyn Dua highlighted the aspect of, I think, Kenya. We've also seen authoritarianism also succeeding. We should be clear if we have to say democracy does not exist, or those who are in power through military coups, they are succeeding in their countries, and they are being celebrated today, just like democracy is also being celebrated in countries like in Kenya. Where do we draw the line, and where do we make the difference between democracy and now authoritarianism or non-democracy celebrated now in countries like in West Africa?
You see, what a lot of people are looking at is actually not the constitution nor the length of time that a leader stays in power. In Africa, most Africans don't really care how long a person stays in power. What they are interested in is the results that the individual produces. If you are in power and you are capable of producing results, for example, I want to use a situation using Libya before. The Libyan leader, Gaddafi, was in power for years, for decades. Truth be told, the Libyans themselves had no problem with the individual because of the results he was producing on the table.
Now, we have leaders, let me not cut the show, we have leaders who have been in office for more than 40 years. Is it because of the results they are producing?
Nope.
That's why they're in office for this long?
Nope.
Because we see the citizen, they don't care, but the country continues.
Can you just let me drop my thoughts first? You see, the problem, if you look at, like I mentioned, Gaddafi, such an individual actually lived for the people. He worked for the people. He was doing everything to make sure his people benefit from the resources that the nation was producing. But that's not the case with every one of them who stayed long in power. You have, for example, in Cameroon, I always like to come back to Cameroon because my country. We have a leader that has been in power for 40 years. And in 40 years, the nation is sinking, practically sinking. In the 70s and early 80s, Cameroon has the capacity to feed Asian nations. But today, the same Asian nations are feeding Cameroon. For example, recently we received tons of bags of rice from China, which is something that in the 60s, 70s we were doing when it comes to leadership. Why? Because the individual was thinking of how to develop the nation. There were several industries that were established during the reign of the first president of Cameroon, which were closed during the reign of the second president of Cameroon. The question is, what happened? What caused the closure of those companies? You had companies that were producing tomato, you had companies that were producing sugar, you had companies, even to the least company of Sikam that we have today that's dying. You had airlines. Do you know today it is the government that is actually struggling to sustain what they call Cameco. It is consuming money than giving money. That notwithstanding, they still keep on holding on to it and giving in taxpayers' money into it. Why? Poor leadership. Poor leadership. If these individuals were being productive, people would not have been focused in that direction because their lives would have been better off. If you go to a place like Equatorial Guinea, Equatorial Guinea has a long-serving president like Cameroon. I'm sure he has even been in power more than Mr. Biya. But do you realize that in Equatorial Guinea there's less noise? I've been there and I've seen the work that has been done when it comes to that small nation, they have been able to pull in their resources to develop the nation. When did they discover oil? Just recent. But Cameroon has been exploiting oil, crude oil, for more than 4 decades today. the difference is clear. And so the people of Equatorial Guinea will not feel the pain that Cameroonians are feeling. And they will not rise up to say, no, let's talk about constitution and whatsoever. They don't care, because they are not feeling the pain that those of us who are living in a country where individuals seem to be changing the constitution to fit their caprices, they don't feel it like us. So, like I was trying to say, the real problem in Africa is not the idea of, oh, they change the constitution to increase their term in office. No. The problem is their capacity to produce results. Are they producing results? No. Most of them are not producing results. In fact, they have shown us that they are in power not for themselves. No, I mean not for the people, but for themselves. And so they are interested in building big their families and not the nation. If you look at a place like Uganda, Ugandans have a serious problem because you see they riot every day, they want to create problems every day. But the individual who is sitting in power seems to have created, should I call it, a safe haven for him and his family. I think his son, if you see the threats his son, who is a general, is giving, he's more than a politician. The problem there is struggling to consolidate power and forgetting to work for the betterment of the country, the development of the people of the country, and for the well-being of the people. When that is not done, trust me, the people will see the pain. They want to focus on that constitution, because they think that the constitution is supposed to be, like somebody said here, that is the soul of the nation. The constitution is the soul of the nation. That's a thought, a good thought. I heard Barrister Ndive actually made mention of the fact that if you look at the constitution, we have some very beautiful things inside. For example, freedom of speech. We have so many things. I said that all those things were important. They don't even know what they were writing.
All right.
Because in reality, even though professors sat down on top of that, they were just copying from somewhere in order to disguise what they wanted to do. And they brought it so that you guys should be happy that, oh, we have a constitution that says we have freedom of speech. We have a constitution that permits freedom of movement. You see, the level of tribalism that we have, particularly in Cameroon today, is worse than I've ever seen in a nation. Why? Because of that same constitution. Even though the constitution says that you are free to own a home, in fact, to stay anywhere in the nation, we have a serious problem with tribalism that is even promoted by the government. And so you start asking questions. Which constitution are they following? Is it another secret one that they have written? Or is it simply because they want to divide the people so that they can forcefully maintain themselves in power and then continue doing what they are doing while the Cameroonians are suffering? As well, I'm talking more of Cameroon because, you see, as long as I live in this country, I should better speak about it, because it is one of the African nations that was supposed to be an example to many other African countries, but it is a shame to the global Africa. Right. In fact, it's a shame.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Mark Anthony. And you talk about the issue shouldn't be how long leaders stay in power, but we should focus on their productivity.
Results.
Yeah. Metro Alex Ndive, we understand in Africa, every incumbent is going to argue that they've been productive, reasons why they want to stay in power, reasons why they change the constitutions, reasons why even when they are old and out of age, they still want to stay in power because they believe and they argue that they have been productive. Now, can we actually focus on the aspect that leaders should stay in power because they are productive? Prof highlighted the aspect of probably Equatorial Guinea, which is close by, and he believes that Equatorial Guinea is productive. Should it be a reason why leaders should stay in power?
Well, at the end of the day, there is what they call the rule of law. And when we have law, we have laws. And if you are a president and you cannot have a successor, and you've been in power for more than even 10 years, I'm not going as far as 40 years, it means you're a failure. Because it's not about individual. In the Constitution of Cameroon, they say, is it Article 5, the president of the country shall define the policy of the country. Even if you're Albert Einstein, even if you're the most intelligent person, no one person can define the policy of a country.
Thank you.
When you stay in a country, what you do, political parties, they have conferences, they debate, they talk, they come to it, a manifesto. But the Constitution of Cameroon says one man, even me, any person, Dr. Akumbong, Dr. Ndima, no one person on earth, no matter how you're intelligent, because people are good in their own field, particular field. So when a constitution says one person will define a policy, when I look, the most comical constitution on planet Earth is Cameroon Constitution. I read it every day, I look and I laugh. I say, how can people sit and this happen? And I said something, I agree with Dr. Akumbong. If you are a leader, look at the Western country. It was constructed by dictators, not democracy. We are making a mistake. President Barack Obama made this clear. Election is not democracy. Hitler was elected. Saddam Hussein was elected. Election is not democracy. Democracy is what? The most important part to me. Accountability, scrutiny. And you see, in the United Kingdom, how many years ago, the opposition, they never had any legal power. It was 1st of July 1937. They had statutory function. If you look, what is their job? To scrutinize and hold the government to account. I'm disappointed with a lot of political parties, especially the main ones in Cameroon. They don't know, they don't have a job. You look at the Constitution of Cameroon, is it Article 3 if I'm not mistaken? They shall make sure they promote the integrity and that's what groups and politicians, that's what they say. They put them together. Groups and political party shall make sure there is unity. That's what they say. Ask them what's their job? No job. That's why when Kamto left Paris, went to Douala, they have to do what they are doing to Kamto. That's why Kamto was arrested. That's why Chiruma is out of the country, because they don't have a job. When they say there's multi-partism, what they would have been doing is to make sure they have a statutory job. They don't have it, they don't even know that. You have to. When the law said the job of an opposition is to do this, so if Kamto is going to do his job, or Beloguba, or Chiruma, or whosoever, they will not arrest them. The gendarme will not do anything because they have a job. What they should be fighting for is to have a statutory job. That they say, this is what you have to do. You have to scrutinize the government. You have to hold them to account. That is democracy to me. Democracy is not about election. Mandwa said that the job of a politician is to stay in power. I don't think so. That's not the job. The job of a politician is to do what? Legislate policy. That's their job. The job of a politician is to represent constituency. That is their job. The job of a politician is to scrutinize and hold the government to account. That's their job. The job of a politician is to campaign in the community. That's their job. Yes, I want to stay in power, but I have to do something before I stay in power. We cannot do what they call do nothing, then we say the job is to stay in power. In order for you, if you want to stay in power, it's not about gerrymandering the constitution. It's not about changing term limit. It's not about saying that the president can guarantee the judiciary. Put the rules, fair rules, then work for the people, better the life of the people. I believe the job of a politician is to better the life of our people, is to advocate for them. Unfortunately, our constitution in Cameroon says a man in Bamenda should represent the entire nation. When they are voting you in a small, not the whole Bamenda, because we have so many members of parliament.
Very terrible.
Yes, so we have different people. I live in London. My own area in London, my MP represents this, my own area. The other person in North London have nothing to do with me. But in Cameroon, they say, all of you shall represent the nation. So how many members of parliament have been in the entire Cameroon, the different parts? Because they have to, in order to represent the entire nation, you have to know a village in Betua. You have to know a place in Miami. You have to know a place in Oshengingo. So how can you represent places that you don't know? So these people, they don't read these things. Sometimes I'm frustrated. They don't read their constitution to know. The constitution is just a window dressing exercise. So we should know this. Politics is good, but we should not come and mislead our people because it is very, very important. To me, I've never been to Dubai. When I look at Dubai, everybody is going there. What? There's something nice there. Look at the form of a government. Is it election? No. But Dubai is good. Look at Singapore. Look at Qatar. When I was growing up, I was so proud. I would defend Cameroon to my last breath. But today, when we look at it, let's not go far. Look at Yaoundé. Look how dirty it is. They deal with it like a sacred cord. Because in life, at the end of the day, if I come to that country, even if there's no democracy there, but I see they are making the country, if you look at Rwanda, I'm not a fan of Kagame. Friends of mine, they have been to Rwanda. You go to a public office, you don't give bribe. You do the things they give you the same day. But in Cameroon, they say, on va traiter ce dossier. Is it a patient? I've never heard in my lifetime in the United Kingdom that they traiter dossier. If they say, bring your passport, bring this, bring this, bring this, you take it to an office, they look at it, they tick it, the dossier is treated instantly. But the system in some African country and Cameroon is there to do what? It's about, the system is there to please the people in power. I understand what Dr. Ndi said, that il n'y a pas le citoyen. I heard that thing from somebody else before. Because most people think they have to benefit from something. I don't need to benefit anything in the Cameroon. It's my country. If I want to go there, I want to make sure there are good roads, good hospitals, the roads are safe. What are you going to benefit if they give you even 1 million francs CFA? You eat the money, but there's bad road. One politician in Cameroon, Madame Founi, she had an accident and died. That road did not save her. So it's not about what they give you. Because at the end of the day, if you have good road, good hospital, that's what's important. If you're sick, you go to the hospital. I remember when I was young, growing up in Boya, the hospital was free. I read an article in BBC, somebody who could not pay the bill was in prison in a hospital. So we have gone that backwards. And when we say, I understand, we import certain things, as some of the panelists said, from the West. But I will take it 100 times to have what former Saudi Cameroon had in 1954 to 1961. The same system that we have in UK, parliamentary system where they hold you to account. And that's why when Dr. Endeli was defeated, there was no change of constitution. He handed it to John Gu Foncha. So we had that system. Unfortunately, the France-Afrique system have absorbed us to centralization. So I will welcome the English system that we had in 1954 in Boya, in Saudi Cameroon. I will have that. There's nothing wrong to copy. India, they copy. Americans, they copy. But copy good things.
So thank you very much for that, Maitre Alex Nzive. And we talked with Marilyn Dua, and I want to go on the aspects of Maitre Alex Nzive highlighting that oppositions are supposed to hold leaders to account, even if the parliament fails to do so, which is supposed to be the guardian of the constitution. Do we blame opposition leaders here in countries where the constitution is not being respected? We've seen in most cases the oppositions are silent, and not silent at all, but many are being chased and many are on the run. Some end up being out of the country because they try to raise their voices high. How do we redesign the constitution? And is there something extra that can be done with regards to constitution and the constitution being respected by incumbents? The citizens, of course, Dr. Eddie talked about no citizens and not being citizens because they are, of course, most times silent. What do you think about that, Mami Lindwa?
Yeah, I want to support that idea because, and it's deeper than that because, you know, democracy, this form of Western democracy is foreign to us. And no one taught us how to be engaged because for a democracy to be functional, you have all the players need to be engaged in the process. So you need an informed electorate. You need an engaging opposition for the system to work. In Africa, we had our form of governance, in Egypt, pre-Egypt, our traditional systems. In my nation, the Ejagan people, we had our form of governance with our kings and how our notables, our queen mothers, and how things run. But this Western form of democracy that was imposed on us, we did not receive a handbook. And so a lot of the players that are supposed to be engaged are not doing what they're supposed to do. In Africa, for example, particularly in Cameroon that I'm very familiar with, I always call the opposition the story of the ugly duckling, because there could be so much more. And I don't want to blame them completely, because a lot of the players, when they came in Gabon, for example, we saw Omar Bongo during when the multi-party came into play. Omar Bongo simply gave the opposition leaders a lot of money to run their campaigns, and a lot of them had not seen that much money before, and it kind of derailed their passion for being opposition. So those are the things we're dealing with. And if you see in Cameroon, for example, we have that, and other African countries where people don't know how to engage, where if you have a difference in philosophy, a difference in opinion, people take you as their enemy. We see, for example, in Cameroon, in the Ambazonia struggle, there are so many factions. You have where you have where somebody does not believe in ideology, people call for you to be arrested for an ideology. Because this was a borrowed system of government that was imposed on us. We're not sure, and the people were never educated on how it's supposed to work, on the engagement, on the debates that have to happen, and how people are supposed to be to engage. So I totally agree that the opposition is not really holding the government's feet to the fire like they should. A lot of times we see in elections where the opposition decides to not engage. They decide to stay at home, call people to boycott the elections, which are very wrong moves, and then you end up having the ruling party has a majority. Then they can change the constitution because there's nobody to stop them. And even in Africa, we see that a lot of people don't even understand, because in Cameroon, for example, those who claim to be federalists are only fighting for the presidency. If you're a true federalist, federation is several levels of governance. You need to be equally engaged in your municipal election. You need to be equally engaged in your parliamentary election. You need to be equally engaged in your senatorial. You don't wait and then just one presidential election, that's where everybody comes up. That means that you're not a federalist, you're not a Democrat, you're a power monger. You just want the power of the presidency. You're not engaged in democracy. And so these are some of the issues that we have, where journalists like yourself, you have to, you brought this topic up that we can debate it, so we can educate our people. For democracy to work, you need the electorate to be informed and to know how the system works. So those are some of the problems, and we have a long way to go. Thank you.
It appears we actually have a long way to go, Ma'am Lindwa. Thanks for that. And just to remind us, if you're watching us, if you want to contribute, you can get to us via the number which we put on your screen. You can scan the code and get to us directly. Call us, share with us your thoughts regarding African constitutions, whether they are shields of democracy or a weapon in the hands of incumbents. And that's our topic of discussion for today. We talk with you, Dr. Eddie Eric. Ma'am Marilyn talked about Western form of democracy, which is in play in the African continent. What do you think is the kind of democracy that can actually work in Africa within this present context? We've seen military rulers doing well in West Africa, but as well, we've had leaders who've been in different African countries who were also military personnel, like Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Egypt, of course. Now, what form of democracy do you think can actually work in Africa? Do you think it's a form or the system that's in place currently in West Africa, or is there another form of democracy that we can copy, or another form of governance that we can copy that can work in Africa at the moment?
I want to go back to some of the debates that we heard in the early 1990s, 2000s, when all this so-called revival of democracy was on the way in Africa.
Doctor, your microphone. Doctor, position your microphone. Your microphone is a bit I think you need to pull it down towards your mouth, I think.
Hello?
Yeah, sure, it's good now.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to repeat what I was saying, I want to take us back to some of the debates that we heard in the early 1990s and 2000 when this whole notion of the revival of democracy gained ground in Africa. We had some political, pundit, political science, philosophers who believe that the notion of an African democracy does not exist, and that the leaders who actually used that terminology of again African democracy were just creating something, constructing something to move away from the general trend of democracy again. I believe that this was a way of perpetuating the imposition of a political system from the above or from outside, as we have seen. Having said that, what forms of democracy? But listen, if the people in Africa, in respective countries, aspire to live in nations where they have access to water, potable water, where the land is kept safe from pollution, from deforestation, where people enjoy the dividends of democracy, one of them being the ability to enjoy the riches, the wealth of the land that they live in, and the riches and the wealth include not just the natural riches, not the agricultural riches, not the air, the waters, but also the people who live in there, because this is one of the riches and wealth that we have. So this is enough foundation for me, I believe, to create a political system that is also informed with the cultural systems that we have, the cultural political systems that are inherent, endogenous to those spaces. I believe it will be a very good start. Let's give some precise examples. At the end of the day, Bitain, we ask ourselves this question: is the notion of term limitation working? Maybe not, maybe yes. But if it is not working, the question is why after 3 decades, since the 1990s up to now, we continue to draft constitutions in which we include term limits for whoever is holding the executive. Why are we including that? Why is that we don't have opposition leaders today who can champion the cause and say, hey, listen, I am for a constitution in which we do not limit the term of the president or limit the term of whoever is holding the executive, whether it is a man or a woman, but we put the emphasis more on what the Professor Mark Anthony said earlier, which is the outcome, the product, the results, instead of doing this. But at the same time also, we want to say that whether people are more interested in the result, there is also a moral aspect of politics. When the politicians say that he's for a limitation of term, and then while exercising this term, he changes the constitution, he poses a very grave, serious problem of trust. Because constitution say what? People have to be trustworthy. If people cannot trust you because every single day you keep changing and reneging on what you said earlier without any probable cause, that's the issue. Without any probable cause, then there is an issue. We have seen the leaders in Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, the current head of state, saying he is not coming to power to stay long. He even blamed the late Mugabe at the time. Why are you in power? Because when you reach the age of 80, you should be leaving power. He himself has reached the age of 80 and he's still in there. And as long as he's alive, I believe that he will remain in power. There is a question of a morality in it here. How are we building new generations when the people who hold the helm of the power are not morally accountable. So, what kind of democracy? I will militate and I will promote the kind of democracy, therefore, that is based, ingrained, and takes into consideration the social, political systems that you have in the lands. Colonization came, that's true. Colonization destroyed, changed a lot of ways in which we do things. But colonization did not destroy all of our cultures. Today, in Cameroon, in Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, all of those countries, you continue to have languages that we speak those African languages. You continue to have a village system. In Cameroon, you continue to have kings, princes in some areas here and there. In Nigeria, same thing, Cote d'Ivoire, everywhere. Those things should be taken into consideration in drafting the new constitution or in the making of the political system that you want to live in. I'm going to end with these examples. We have, in many African countries, the superimposition of what we call, quote unquote, the modernity versus what we will call the traditional system. Some countries like Sierra Leone at one point try to integrate that and say, hey, when it comes to the parliamentary system, we're going to move with what they call constitutionalism, meaning incorporating those traditional rulers into the parliaments. I think Zambia also has a system a little bit like that, which means that we are bringing a fabric that we deal with every single day into a new system. So maybe at the end of the day, having said all of that, we need to revisit the notion of where do we put the emphasis? Are we going to put the emphasis on term limits, or are we going to put the emphasis on how well people deliver when they are in power, and how well the people are able to control those who are supposed to be delivering? Maybe it's time for us to rethink the whole thing about, elections. Rethinking doesn't mean, wiping that away or taking that away, but how do we make sure that those who are elected truly reflect the aspirations of the people they are supposed to lead? I believe this is the kind of political system that we want to put in place, whether we call it a democracy or we don't call it democracy, as long as it works to respect people's human rights, to respect people's right to work, to respect people's right to have a family, to respect people's right to live without being attacked, because the democracy also needs to be secured, to be protected. We need an army. Today, what are we seeing in our countries? We are condemning these ways of life, right? Very harshly. We are condemning, I'm opening a can of worm here. We are condemning polygamy, but at the same time, we are being quiet, some sort of, with some other ways of lives. Knowing that the power of a nation starts first with what? Not with weapons. And my brother, Maître Alex, will concur with me. You can have all the weapons, but you need people to shoot the weapons. So the very first power in a democracy are the people. We need to have a people, and we need to have a well-raised and trained people. I believe these are the sediments for me that will yield the political system that we have. The said political system will really reflect the aspiration of people and work for the people. Whether we call it a democracy or not, that's not the point. The point is, does it align with our ways of life? So far, maybe that's not what is happening. Let me handle that.
Thank you, Dr. Eddie Eric. You're talking about the will of the people. Prof, we look at the will of the people and look at the wave of coups we had in West Africa and how massively this was supported by the people. And to some Pan-Africanists believe that democracy is still being used by the West to, change the narrative of what Africans truly aspire to be or to become. And the will of the people was reflected in West Africa when we saw the coup d'etats happen and how massively they supported those who took power. within this context of the will of the people, do we go with what the people desire? Looking at military leaders in Africa who are productive, we've seen the examples of West Africa and Rwanda. Kagame, I think, was a military leader, and Egypt as well was a military leader. Do you think being a military makes you more productive or more responsible with regards to, meeting up with the demands of Africans, which is about development, looking at what Traoré has been able to achieve in Burkina Faso this far?
George Washington, who was a soldier, the first president of the United States, made a statement which still rings it today. He said, discipline is the soul of the soldier. Discipline is the soul of the soldier. What does that actually imply? You see, it has to do with moral accountability. Like that's one of the things that I heard Dr. say, and which is one of the things that is lacking in most civilian leaders across the continent. They lack moral accountability. And so, putting everything together, I want us to look at things from this perspective. What is going to cause one leader in Africa to be accountable, productive, and at the same time loved by the people? I've already given the answer to it, but I'm still asking, why would they do that? The greatest problem with citizens, well, let me not put it a problem. What will cause citizens to rise against a particular regime or government is directly related to economics. When their stomachs are empty, like it is popularly said in Africa, a hungry man is an angry man. In my native village here, we have a parable that says that your hands won't be bitter except you touch bitter leaf. If leaders take into account that the people whom they are sitting in power to actually govern are the priority, then the focus in creating the opportunities that permit these people to live comfortable, because it is from this atmosphere that they create, it is the climate that they create, leaders create, that permits what happens down there. In leadership, there is something we call, in fact, when it comes to organizational leadership, it is the leader that determines the organizational climate. What he wants that should happen, he needs to instill it in the people. So, if you see what is happening in West Africa, that happened in West Africa and is still happening, let's put it that way, you realize that the people got a sense and an orientation towards freedom. They want freedom. But their freedom is not related to the idea of democracy per se. Like we say, okay, I need to be able to vote who I want. No. They want that the person who is sitting there should work for them, should do what they want. To them, that's a sense of freedom that they get. And when you do what they want, it means you are able to give them food. You are able to protect them. The soldiers should be there for them, because that's the purpose of the military. They should be able to live their lives freely, move up and down freely. That is important for them. The amenities that are there should be provided for them. With that, you will not hear anybody complain. And at the same time, a leader needs to be accountable to the people. You need to be accountable. There are a lot of politicians, like I heard Dr. Edi actually saying, we have heard guys came for campaign and said, I'm going to just do 2 terms and I'm going to leave. We saw that in Ivory Coast, where a person that Ivorians fought to make him sit in power betrayed them because he disrespected his own voice, his own words. That's moral. There's no moral accountability there. That's moral decadence. And if you go down again, let's look at presently what is happening in Zimbabwe. And the same guy was, wow, he was the same person who made everything, asked even to ask our man Mugabe why he was killing himself in power. He should go and rest. But he has forgotten what he promised the people, and today he's doing everything to change the constitution. That is in itself betrayal. Do not expect that tomorrow, when Zimbabweans move to the streets, they should be happy with him. Okay, let's look at what happened in the West African countries that resulted to the people moving to the streets and demanding for accountability and justice. It came from the fact that people were no more living well. Hunger was already, in fact, look at, let me take an example, Burkina Faso. A nation that had been abandoned. Why? Why do I use the word abandoned? There was practically little or no development happening, but the leaders were feeding fat. The people obviously got angry about it and went down to the streets. Going down to the streets was not against the government, but to support the coup that took place. Implying that they did not care whether it was a military person or a civilian that was there, but somebody who is going to think of their stomachs. So as I said, the greatest problem that causes coup d'etats, that causes people to riot, is hunger. It's economics. If you can deal with the economics, then you would have created a path which will permit people to be, let me use the word docile to every act that you might commit after. But that does not mean that because you have handled the economic aspect, you should just do what you want. No. Continuity is what the people want. But they also want to live free and prosperous. So those are some of the things we are looking. Are they providing these things for our people? They are not. Most of these countries are not. Most of these leaders are not doing that. We look at a country, let's take a country like Ghana. When J.J. Rawlings came to power, seized power, let me make it clear, in the early 80s, he did that twice. When he first of all took it, he gave it back to a civilian leader, thinking that he was going to fix the country. But rather, he came and multiplied the dimension of corruption in the country. And because of that, J.J. Rawlings came again the second time, seized power the second time. This time he didn't give it. He sat in office. He made sure that all those corrupt leaders were eliminated. Then he started the building of the country, which he later on gave over. So he was a transition leader to build that country. Today there's respect of the constitution. There is a dimension of economic independence. There is a dimension of economic freedom to the people, even though it is not perfect, but there is a dimension. Then, come to Nigeria. There were a lot of coup d'etats until Obasanjo finally was elected into office in the second period as president, did his best to fix the country, and came out of office after the second term. That was a precedent to follow. And after that, it was followed. Go to Senegal. You discover that afterwards, Senegal became stable. Why? There are individuals who come to power and fine-tune or direct the course in which things are going to take place. They build the institutions over individual positions. They make sure that there is economic stability in one way or the other. Then they hand over power. You see what just happened in West Africa recently, when the general in Mali first seized power. Don't forget, he handed it over. He expected things to move well, but the corruption continued. He came back, took it, and sat on it. In Burkina Faso, the coup d'etat happened twice. And Traoré overthrew another military leader who, in one way or the other, was getting comfortable and doing the things that the colonial master was happy with. And when he took over, he shifted his position. And they have been continuous. Okay, look at what happened in Niger as well. How did it happen? The elected president was working based on the definitions of another. That's foreign influence. And the people were suffering. Let's be sincere. The problem comes back to that economy. The people were suffering. And so when that coup d'etat took place, the people came out to support it. Okay. Why? They needed somebody who worked for them, not for the foreigner, not for the outsider. You asked about Egypt. Go to Egypt. You realize that the leadership before the present military leader was civilian. And there was a dimension of corruption and dictatorship which was destroying Egypt. Look at the Egypt of today and the Egypt back in 2011 and behind. The degree and level of development is different. What is causing that? Recently, I don't want to call it a fake coup d'etat, but a guy in Gabon, who is also a military guy, I see him call meetings with his ministers and threaten them, give them length of time to produce results. And if you know you cannot, you should resign. Those are individuals who are doing everything to ascertain the fact in the minds of the people that no, I want life to be better for you people. All right. So when that is in place, the people stay comfortable. They might not react, even though they might see some little things that, okay, they'll say no, but that, at least you are human. You can make those mistakes. So I think that, to round it up, to conclude here, the greatest problem in Africa is neither democracy nor the dictatorship idea. It's the economic problem. Okay. Which, if it is solved, then there will be a difference. We can come later with any form of government that we want to come with. but let the people live comfortably.
All right. Let people live comfortably. Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Akumo Makantoni. We'll talk with you, Metro Alex Zive. Let's equally look at what is happening with countries of the AES, the Alliance of Sahel States, and what these three leaders have been able to achieve within a very short time. And their military leaders, they came into power through military takeovers. Metro Alex Zive, I just want to be clear. I just want to ask you, will you be worried if these leaders have to stay longer in power without respecting any form of constitution or term limit or whatsoever, based on the fact that they have been able to do what the people want of them? Will you be worried if they stay longer in power? And what would be the difference between them and Zimbabwe's president Mnangagwa, who on his part equally has, increased the term limits and equally removed direct presidential election and using parliament elections? What do you think, or what difference is there between these two?
In any country, you need somebody who is going to set an institution. When I mean institution. In France, you had somebody called Charles de Gaulle. He was a general. He set an institution that people have to come and build on it. In UK, you have somebody called General Walpole. He has to overthrow the monarchy and set the first republic in UK. In America, you had what? George Washington, a general. They have to set the foundation. In Africa, Senegal, you have Senghor. Somebody who was practicing politics in France before Senegal had independence. He became a member of parliament. He became a minister. He became a cabinet minister. So that man understood democracy. So today when I see in Africa, people say, oh, Senegal is like this. Their first president, Senghor, put that foundation. A lot of African countries, they never had that foundation.
That's right.
So the point is, it's going to be a dictator who is going to set the foundation. Somebody who is a benevolent despot. Yeah, put everywhere. Unfortunately, in most African countries, we don't have those things. Today, we are looking at those young guys in Senegal. Before Abdou Diouf, Abdoulaye Wade, these people, it is Senghor. Senghor was a Democrat, their first president. He practiced democracy in France, became a cabinet minister. Then when Senegal had its independence, was their first president. So that foundation was important. Just like I say, in England, it was General Walpole. In France, it was General de Gaulle. In America, it was General Washington. So these things are important. When you look at the other countries, who were the people? They kill the people and they implant puppets for the West. And when we talk about democracy, people think, listen, I'll give you a basic definition of democracy. You don't copy democracy. Democracy simply means government by the people, for the people, and of the people. That's what democracy means. Democracy doesn't mean take English or French and put it in Africa. It means a government of the people, by the people, for the people, which means we don't have that system or that law that can allow us to have our local people to decide on what they want. Elections are rigged in most African countries. So it just simply means, it doesn't mean, oh, most democratic things were important. No, they were not important. Democracy means local people should elect the form of government that they want. If they want Manu culture, if they want Babala culture, if they want dog culture, if they want Bulu culture, Douala, that's what democracy means. But we don't have that opportunity because elections are rigged. So it's very important that we know this, because sometimes we mistake, we think, oh, democracy was important. One, and after democracy, what? Accountability. And what's democracy? The purpose of democracy is what? To serve, to protect, to improve the lives of the citizens, not to rule. I repeat, democracy is what? To what? To serve, to protect, and improve the life of the people. That's what democracy means. So sometimes we can use that word, but democracy doesn't mean election. We make that mistake. So At the end of the day, democracy, the definition is there. I'm sure what I'm saying. On the 19th of November, 1861, Abraham Lincoln gave that definition, which I believe. Democracy doesn't mean elect somebody. So it is very, very important that we look at these things. To me, at the end of the day, somebody have to lay that foundation. But we live in many African countries, whether it's Equatorial Guinea, whether it's in Cote d'Ivoire. I met, you say, how do you call him? Alassane Ouattara. I met him in London, in Chatham House. And I tried to ask him something, he dodged away. The person who was supposed to replace Alassane Ouattara, Coulibaly, I met him again in London. And before election, he passed away, he died. So at the end of the day, I don't believe in politics of personality cult. Why I appreciate Captain Traore. But at the end of the day, if you believe in an individual, they might wipe out that individual like Thomas Sankara. Then we'll have to wait for a long time. I believe in people who can set institutions like Senghor in Senegal, that those institutions have remained there for more than 60 years. Abdou Diouf, Abdoulaye, and the other one, you come. You want to change the constitution, the institution say you cannot change it. That's what I want to see. The most important thing in my life, which I know other countries or what somebody might think because I live in the UK, I think is the best. The Prime Minister in the UK is first among equal. He's not above any person. We have the cabinet runs the country. It's not the Prime Minister. Cabinet, which is made up of about 20 to 30 senior ministers. There is a way to remove the Prime Minister in this country. It's there. The law is there. Whether the opposition, there is a way to remove the opposition leader. The problem is that people should respect the rules. In Africa, we don't respect the rule. Without any fear of gainsaying. When my fellow people in the Cameroon, they say Frank Biya should be the next president. Under what basis? I'm not saying he cannot stand. Under what basis? We don't know him. He doesn't talk to the people. I know a couple of people who are my friends. They are close friends to Frank Biya in this country. But somebody who doesn't talk to you. So sometimes it's the mentality of the people. Mandua said they don't educate the people. I don't think you have to educate somebody to think that I need water, I need electricity, I need this. You have to know that. The most intelligent person on planet Earth to me is an illiterate. Illiterate in the sense that when we came on planet Earth, there was no writing. All this technology, there was not there. It was your great-grandparents who said, okay, if I take my maize to the market, I have a lot of it. I supply a lot, the price will go down. If I send less to the market, the price will go up. That was an illiterate. So I don't believe in this thing that they have to tell you. By nature, Homo sapiens are very intelligent. We are. You don't need to go to school to be intelligent. I believe in that. Because one, if you look on planet Earth, the first university was in Morocco, in this world. The first human being was in Africa. When you look at the pyramid, is it what? More than 4,000 and something years ago. That was Africa. But the problem is, in Africa, we have a lot of people, let's call them leaders, who are stifling development. It's not that the people in Africa, they are not talented. They are very talented. But at the end of the day, why should I have Nigeria as my neighbor? There's South Africa. Instead of us to do what they call comparative cost advantage. If you want to do things in Africa, you should deal with your African neighbor first. Then when you cannot have that technology before you go out of Africa, the African Union will not do that. Who is sponsoring African Union? Europeans. Are we that broke? Instead of taking loans, why can't we make sure we take technology, exchange? It is easy for us to do those things. In Cameroon, when you look at the constitution of CDC, it makes it clear all the products of CDC, we are going to export it. What were the colonial people doing in Africa? Export things. So after the so-called independence, why are we still exporting our things? If we cannot do the finished product, why can't we say it's easy? Okay, German people, Nestle, IKEA, they do furniture. Okay, come to my country and produce this thing that we are not going to export the timber anymore. We are not going to export the diamond, gold, and timber anymore. They don't do it deliberately. They sell it here, they produce it, then they send it back to us, a continent that they say we are poor. Because most African leaders, they are working for the West. That's a fact. Because at the end of the day, if you're a leader in Africa, call your people. How come that CC Road and other people, they left Europe, this European country. They went to Africa, in South Africa, Johannesburg, Cape Town, in Zimbabwe. How come that they developed that place? You go to Bona, is it Bona prison in Douala? It's small, it's clean. When you go to Aqua, everybody's moving there. Do you think it's a mistake? Because these people, they can go to our continent, they talk to the president and do what we do. Because our leaders don't respect their people. In the Western country, a minister, I will say this, I see the way my compatriot Minister Atanganji talk to people. I see it, I've seen video. You can never do that in this Western country. If a minister talk to me the way Atanganji is talking in UK, you resign. So the point is, we don't respect our own people. That is why in England, we have what we call mutual respect. What does it? We have English values. English value means what? Democracy, rule of law, mutual respect, tolerance. That's it. It's important. So when we talk to each other, it doesn't matter whether I disagree with you. Like Mandua made a statement that people have their opinion, they turn against people. In Cameroon, I'll tell you, man from Boya, my mom from Balinyonga, but my best people, ever since I've been living in Cameroon, are the Betty people. My private life is my private life. It's my private life. So I have my people for how many years? I get along with them. So it's an individual thing. It's true that people are tribalistic, they are blah, blah, blah. Doctor said it. He said it. It's true. I know it. But I went to Ngwakele. I've seen a few people. But in life, it's about how people are open or whatsoever. Some people, they think, to me, my political opinion has got nothing to do with my family. So it's up to us to understand that those things. But however, I don't know whether they still teach physics in Cameroon, civics. They used to teach it. They used to tell people, we need to have a value that people will be teaching people. I have seen a video, it's on YouTube years ago. Thomas Sankara used to call it La Corruption, Abba. This is Abba in front of primary school children. But I don't see our leaders in the Cameroons doing those things because sometimes leaders, they have to go out and say certain things. When I come to the Cameroon, the best place I always find myself, I have pictures there for more than 20-something years. I go to the market, I see the people, I talk about with them, ask them, what are they going on? And they smile, they're happy, they're surprised to see somebody they don't know talking to them. We need leaders who go and talk with people in the market and make them to feel they are human beings. But they don't do that. In England recently, our new prime minister, he goes everywhere. He goes to a pub, have a drink with people. You need leaders who inspire people. And at the end of the day, there are individuals who are good, like Captain Traore. I like it. But at the end of the day, if we don't build an institution, we rely on one person. The day they will knock him out, will have the effect of Thomas Sankara. So I don't believe in individual, but we need somebody to lay the foundation. If that person lay the foundation, then the other people can protect it. Because if somebody, we love Traore, and he's not there tomorrow like is it Sankara, what happens? We start again all over. So we need institution, not individuals.
All right, thank you very much, Maitre Alex Nzeve. We need institutions and we need leaders who need to lay the foundation for such institutions. And equally, you highlighted that most leaders work for the interests of their Western masters, reasons why they produce less for their people because they work for the interests of the West. And this West will always be on standby to dismantle any foundation that is being laid by such leaders, which we see the case of those in West Africa who are constantly being fought by the West because they at the moment are not working for the interests of their Western, the West at the moment. Mama Lindwa, with regards to laying this foundation and with regards to the fact that we know the West will always want leaders who will work for their interests and they're not going away, they are always there on standby. How do we survive all of this?
We survive all of it by being aware, and African Media has done a great job in creating awareness for the people. It's geopolitics, and so Africans tend to be very emotional instead of being strategic. So it's time for us to get from emotionality and learn how to be strategic. We have to come up with a plan. We have to come up with a plan. The West cannot survive without Africa. I hope you guys know that, the plan was Africa without Africans. They did it it was done in Australia, where the indigenes were, millions of the Aboriginals were, done away with. Here in America, millions of Native Americans were killed, and the rest of them are they put them in settlements. In Argentina, they got rid of most of the black people. You don't even know that they are black Argentinians, So they started up from Southern Africa, and they worked their way up. They met fierce resistance from the Zulu in South Africa. They had all, they were coming up. Namibia, the Germans killed a lot of Namibians, And so they are fighting for their survival, the West. You can't really blame them. Yes, it's immoral, but they are fighting. The only people who don't have a strategy, not working together, is Africans. And they have only themselves to blame. Africans do not have a strategy. They don't come together to strategize. Their African Union is funded by the West, and the West determines the agenda for Africa, the African Union. Africans are the only ones that the wind blows here, they go here, the wind blows there, they don't have any strategy. So it's time for us to come together and make sure that it's working, that whatever we're doing, we're thinking of our future, we're being strategic. Africans believe in praying. There are churches everywhere. They said in Ghana, somebody once said that in Ghana, if you make a church, the hardest thing is to find a name for your church, because somebody probably already, whatever name you can think of, there's a church like that in Ghana already. The hardest thing to create a church in Ghana is to find a name. We begin to pray instead of creating businesses to, employ people to solve our problems, like like Makatoni said, that our major problem is the economy. We are busy encouraging churches, praying, hoping that God will come and save us. But God saves those who save themselves. It's time for us, and it takes two to tango. Let's not just wait on the leaders. Civil society, you have to come up and organize and look for ways to push ourselves, because the West is not sleeping. They have plans on your raw minerals, on your minerals. They have plans for it. And you guys are not planning for it. They are sponsoring PhDs who are writing papers and coming up with think tanks on how to get, because the West cannot afford an Africa that is independent and strong. That's why they keep making sure that, like you said, they make sure that the people in power are the people that work for them, and good presidents like Thomas Sankara and the rest of them are killed. And that's why Ibrahim Traore, there have been attacks on his life. Because Ibrahim Traore is a bad example, according to the West, for the rest of Africa. Because how can you pay your debt in less than how many years? You've already paid all the debts to IMF. They can no longer get interest from you. You're developing your country. You have shown that France was a bad, because the amount of roads that France put in Burkina Faso in 30 years, you have come and done more roads at a fraction of the cost than, so you're, to the West, Ibrahim Traore is a very bad example. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are terrible examples, and they'll keep attempting to on their lives, because that's what they've done in the past, to kill good leaders. So what we need to do, we need to strategize, we need to understand, we need to stop being emotional, we need to stop fighting each other. As Africans, we need to look, they said in Africa, and particularly in Cameroon, for example, we look for everything to fight about. We are always fighting, everything to fight, instead of coming together, getting consensus and working. I also want to add on something that somebody said. Somebody said that, I agree that Africans are the easiest people on planet Earth. We don't really care in longevity of who is in power, so long as you're doing your work. And we see that in China. China just recently changed their constitution to keep Xi Jinping as the leader for, nobody knows till what time. Xi Jinping has been the leader of China for the past, I can tell you in a little bit, but I know over 10 years, and they just changed the constitution in China to keep Xi Jinping in power. And nobody's protesting in China because once there's development, China has taken over the United States as a world power. Nobody is, if you're happy, things are moving, nobody cares who is the president. And remember that Angela Merkel was the president, was the German chancellor for a very long time. So the problem is governance. The problem is governance, how the people are being governed. I do agree with Dr. Edi that we need to look at our cultural particularities and insert it in our governance, like we had in the past before the West came. We, for example, we have our traditional rulers that are very important. Those are the true leaders. During colonization, the West came and usurped their power and put false leaders in their places. You have somebody in Cameroon say, they say chef there. I say chef there for who? You are not the chef there in my village. These are ancestral land. Chef there for who? And you have people coming, they are doing mafia and selling people's lands. From Guti, where I'm from, we are in the process of trying to reclaim our lands because some of these so-called, whether it's SDO or whoever, they are selling lands that they have no business doing mafia and selling the land that they are chef there. So we need to bring power closer to the people. For me, people always accuse me because I really don't really give a hoot about President Paul Biya. He's way too far. People who have impacted my life are the people who are closer to me. My mother had a school in Limbe. It was closed by the regional delegate of education, falsely. Closed my mother's school. That has impacted me throughout my life. Paul Biya had not a say, of course. Ultimately, he's responsible because he's the CEO. And he said, but we need to bring power closer to the people. That's why I am for a federal system of governance where we have governors. We need to share power. There need to be power sharing. You cannot have how many million of people and you have one person, it's power forever. It's not fair. You need to share power. You need to weaken the presidency. You need to make the governors powerful, and the governors need to be elected, not appointed governors. You need a governor from the people, voted by the people, closer to the people. And then they will hold them accountable, because I know the governor's village. I know where is the governor going to hide from? I know his village. I can go to his village. Where will he hide? You bring somebody, I don't even know where they are from. They can do whatever and go back to their village. We are Africans. You need to bring power closer to the people and distribute power. Like, in Nigeria, you have the governors. Here in America, you have the people that actually have the power. They call them the deep state. And they choose whoever to be the president that answers to them. So again, there need to be healthy competition. When you have the governors that are working, and then with the different states, the different regions, there's going to be healthy competition. We have a system of governance that works for the people. We need leaders that are interested in harmony in society and interested in the well-being of the people, not of their colonial masters that make sure that they are in power, or not of themselves. But as a matrix said, a government for the people, by the people, with the people's interest at heart. Luis, when I went to the national dialogue, when we were discussing, I asked them, I said, are we talking about Cameroonians? Are we looking for something that works for Cameroon? Are we trying to please France? What is this about? We went for the national dialogue to talk about the problems of the country. What is the resistance? If the people want this, are we trying to please the France, or are we trying to please the people? I also want to, somebody said that they prefer military rule because civilians lack moral accountability. I just want to differ a little bit, because our traditional leaders have moral accountability. Originally, Africans were very, you hear Burkina Faso, the land of people with integrity.
Yeah, all right.
Burkina Faso. Because Africans were known as people with integrity. Our African leaders, even our parents, until recently, old age went with wisdom. But so I wanted to say that you have people who have just decided immorality because our systems were disrupted. The true leaders were set aside and false leaders were put in their place. That's why we are where we are. Because if you have somebody with moral integrity, why will you have a 90-year-old person who is visibly struggling, who is physically struggling, trying to stay in power in a country where over 50% of the people are under 30 years old? How do you inspire a people? How do you inspire a people? I also agree that and there's no need for that. You can keep the power without being the president. You can put a puppet, which brings us back to our point, Luis, that this Western democracy that was imposed on us, we are still studying it. America is 250 years. Most of us are 50, getting to 60 years. We haven't taken the time to understand. We are too emotional as Africa. Instead of strategizing, we spend our time abusing each other, insulting each other, fighting each other, trying to kill each other because we have different ideologies, instead of coming together to strategize, to push forward our agenda. Again, there's no reason why you're 90 years old, instead of taking your retirement and enjoying your grandchildren, you're struggling to be in power. That's because you have not understood democracy. You have not understood that you can still retain the power and take a young puppet, and put them in front to appease the people, but you have the power. That is exactly what is happening here in America with the deep state. President Obama will tell you that when he came to office, he came with a list of who should be minister. He didn't have wiggle room to do anything. He came with instructions from the powers that be. He was their head boy. So people have not understood this Western form of democracy that we are trying to practice. People have not understood how it works. I also want to say that you will see a prime example in Cameroon, for example, when Kamto was disqualified as a candidate. He decided to take the boycott, and I cry for people like Michelle Ndoki, who would have had a very wonderful career as a politician, because she definitely would have won her elections. But her party decided to boycott. But what happened in Senegal? People who, like Maitre said, had a better understanding of democracy, a better foundation that Senghor had sent. As soon as they disqualified, what's his name? That young man, the previous vice president, Sonko. As soon as they disqualified Sonko, he said, Jomai Faye. He immediately created a coalition with Jomai Faye. He said, a vote for me is a vote for Jomai Faye. And that's how they were able to get rid of the ruling party, because they were able to pivot very quickly and get a new strategy, because they have understood. In Cameroon, for example, in the history of Cameroon, we've been unable to have one opposition candidate, which continues to split the vote. That shows you political immaturity. Political immaturity, where people are pushing themselves rather than pushing the wish of the collective to obtain an objective. So we definitely have to do better. I think that we're moving in the right direction. I think that we have to again liquidate colonization. We have to liquidate. We're dealing with colonization in every aspect of our society, in our lives, in our politics. We have to liquidate colonization, and then we have to try to understand the game so we can have better outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mame Lindwa. We need to definitely understand the game and the democracy that was imposed on the African continent. Dr. Eric, taking from what Mame said, that the West cannot afford to see Africa being self-sufficient. We've seen that severally, and we've seen that with leaders who have made those attempts to make their country self-sufficient without depending on the West, and we've seen several of such examples. With regards to this, Dr. Eddie Eric, what would be your standpoint, your advice, and your comments on this aspect? What can Africans do? What should the citizens do? And how do we preserve ourselves and probably be self-sufficient while, doing what is needful?
Leadership is a key in here, and by saying leadership, I'm not looking simply at the people who are either elected or control power, let me put it this way. I'm looking at the whole spectrum of citizens, people, population, traditional leaders, elected officials, teachers, workers in the formal and informal labor sector. There is a level of leadership that is important in here. Why is it important? It's important to come back to what I said earlier, quoting my late professor. We need to build the citizens. We need to build citizens. We need to build men and women, young men and young women who understand that being given or handed a job or being recruited or hired to work either for the government, for the public sector, or for the private sector, there is an added value, which is that work is being produced for the sake of the betterment of the population, as a whole. Without this kind of citizenship, and where does it start? It starts, of course, with how people are trained, how people are educated, how people are raised in the homes, how people are, of course, were guided in the schools. Education is politics. A basic example that we can give, is what some of us, have known as the First, Second World Wars. We all know that, in some African countries, like in Somalia, I have friends who grew up in Somalia. They don't call these wars the First World War or the Second World War. They call them the Big European War, right? This framing, this change is important in here. As a professor Obenga of Congo will say, one of the best Egyptologists that what we have, we need to go back and question, things. Today, so many African countries are called, third world countries. Of course, this terminology has evolved. It has changed. The more we have a pushback against that. It started with underdeveloped countries, right? It started with poor countries. But at the same time, those international institutions that define poverty as a state that either countries or individuals are trying to escape. So people cannot remain poor forever. There is a movement in that. So let us challenge the terminologies that we use in our everyday things. This will be my best answer, when I talk about leadership. What Africa needs to do in here, I believe, is this. President Ibrahim Traoré, in one of the press conferences very lately, said that nowadays, when people leave Burkina Faso to go study abroad, they need to be accounted for, meaning they need to seek a permission, and the country needs to know what is it that they're going there to study. One of the examples that what he quoted was, people go to Saudi Arabia, and then I'm not making any criticism against any religion in here. I'm quoting a fact. People go to Saudi Arabia, and they come back with all these strong, precepts of imposing the Sharia law or imposing, cutting people, hands and arms. Is it indigenous to Africa? When we go back to the 13th century constitution, which is considered the oldest constitution in Africa, which is the constitution of the Mali Empire under Sundiata Keita. the Kuruka Funga, I believe they call this constitution. When you read this constitution, there is no such things. I know that African traditionally also has, each society has their own forms of a punishment of tipping, what is evil, or banishing what is evil, and then promoting, what is good. And again, this is the reason why I say we need to go back to those kind of roots and see again where we are. So leadership is key, to come back to that. Leadership at the state level, leadership, when it comes to the managers of public funds, when it comes to the managers of public programs, right? The recent episode of COVID, nowadays we are talking about, Ebola in the Congo. But remember what happened during the COVID era. How many of the people who were charged with or taxed with implementing our COVID defense system, how many of them looted from Nigeria to Cote d'Ivoire to Cameroon and all that? How many of those funds left the coffers or were not put where they were supposed to be put? What is the consequence of that for people? So the more people are impoverished, and I didn't say poor, I said the more people are impoverished because of politics that are put in place, the more they will take their eyes away from what or where they need to put them, and the more they will be disengaged, or they will disengage themselves from what we call civic matters, and they will not care about who's ruling, how they're ruling, but they will care about the day-to-day needs that they are actually need to have for their families, for themselves. Why does it matter for somebody? Or what do we think that it will matter for somebody to know that I cannot take care of my child who is sick, although I am a fonctionnaire, je travaille pour l'administration. I cannot take care of my parents. I cannot take care of my family. And you want me to be worried about whoever is sitting somewhere doing how many years in power? No. And that's where I agree with Professor Mark Anthony. It is true that some of the biggest needs are the basic ones. Once those ones are fulfilled, those needs and human rights are fulfilled, I believe that, where people can exert more of the leadership and start tackling, some of the most precious issue, again, to circle back to the issue of a constitution, of a political arrangements, and the political system that, our countries are evolving in. So leadership for me is key. The right leadership that takes inspiration from its roots, from the desires of the people, not from the desires of powers from outside, but the desires of the people. The Cameroonian people, I think, like any other individuals on earth, wherever it is, aspire to live in peace. It means a lot of things. And that's where it should start, and that's what I call leadership that it takes at all levels. It takes leadership for a police officer to know that when the Ben Sikiner in Cameroon is working, I don't know how many hours a day to make a meager revenue for his family, and then you stand at the tip of the road, at the end of the road, to collect half of that portion, as if you, as a police officer or a gendarme, do not receive, any salary. A quote that I want to give you an end on that. I was in Abidjan about, actually in March, and riding a Yango public transportation. I told the driver that all these police officers, the gendarmes that bother you, look at my face when I become president of the Ivory Coast. All of those police officers, we are going to recruit them without any salary. The driver said, then I'm not going to vote for you because they will bother us more. I say, yes, but it does not make any sense. When they are recruited, we pay them a salary as workers. But they act as if it is not enough for them. What do? They are on the street again to bother you. All of those things create problems. So what we will do, we're not going to pay them any salary so that they will go outside and look for their own salaries. We joked and laughed about that, but it was my way of underlining the seriousness of the matter in terms of the lack of leadership that we have. It goes from the bottom all the way. My brothers and sisters, how come national examination periods, you have professors, you have teachers that can connive with families to make sure that, those who do not merit are admitted, Those who merit because maybe they don't have family are not admitted. All of those things actually are the dimensions of what? The non-respect of the Constitution, which is the main topic we are talking about. The leaders are manipulating the constitutions. Yes, true. But the ordinary citizens, or the public workers, or even people who work in the some private administration, some companies themselves also do not respect the Constitution. Because the Constitution clearly establishes that, you know what, a company should respect the law of the land. When you go to a rural area and you start digging illegally or mining illegally, you end up polluting the waters. Everywhere we do not respect the Constitution. But it goes back to the courts, that's worse. Peter, let me end on that. Leadership for me is key, and I have tried to give all these different dimensions of what I call, leadership to answer this question. And I want to end before you take the floor by saying that, I have a hard stop. I want to thank, all of my co-panelists and my sister. We hope to see you more often in there so that we have should I say, gender balance, panel next time. But thank you so much. And Biteng, it was great for me participating again. And anytime you need me, I will be around.
Thank you, Dr. Ederik. We appreciate your time, actually, and we're very grateful for your opinions, and we deeply appreciate that, and you always be on the program. And to conclude on your part, Professor Mark Anthony, African constitutions in the hands of, our leaders, do you think the constitutions protect incumbents, or is there to safeguard democracy with regards to the present context of Africa? Where do you draw your conclusion line, and what do you think could be the way forward?
We had already concluded on that issue to say that these so-called constitutions that are used within Africa actually have one purpose: to protect the politician, to protect the incumbent, not the nation, not the citizens. So, you see, we have been discussing, and something came into my mind. There is this ideology that the French had during colonization in order to work for the assimilation of the people of Africa. They had the idea of the évolue, or should I say the evolved. So they created a system where the evolved will work for them as middlemen, and who are those to lead when they are not? The evolved became the leaders. And that system has continued and is still there till now. After over 60 to 70 years today, that system has been well implanted. Instead of the people emancipating to become independent, they prefer to take the position of the évolue. So when the évolue comes to power, what happens is he is doing everything possible to make sure he remains a good servant to the master. So to be a good servant to the master, you need to use the constitution to defend your position and to conserve power, to protect your power. And that is the purpose of the so-called constitution that they instituted. You see, we live in a continent where it seems as if we have been deprived of our identity. And we have been deceived to believe that we are, should I use the word, a people, using the word évolue is to say we are living in a degree of darkness that permits us to come out of that darkness so that we can truly have an identity that resembles that of the master. But that was the greatest deception that ever came to Africa. And our people have, those who sit there in power today, they are neither Africans, neither are the Europeans, but they are playing a role of the, should I say, the transitor, the person who is doing everything possible to make sure the master, even though he is not available, remains respected. Even though he's not available, receives what he has worked for. And so, you do not expect that our constitution is to protect the people. The people are not the Evolu. And so because they are not the Evolu, they cannot be protected. And so only the Evolu are supposed to be protected. And that is where we find ourselves right now. But I think that Africans are manning it up and they are rising. And that is why, as we are talking, I want to stand and support a point that Panafrican Debate actually mentioned, which is the idea of building institutions, not strong people. Like I earlier said, you see, when you have an enlightened despot in power, he does everything possible to make sure that he creates a path for the future. And when he successfully creates it, he establishes an institution. Those are the kind of people we need right now in Africa. And so I want to say what is happening in Burkina Faso is something that Africa needs to emulate in order to build a system for the future. We need the likes of J.J. Rawlings, because I want to say that the young leader presently in Burkina Faso is following the footsteps of J.J. Rawlings. If he successfully establishes a system, they will be singing the songs that we are singing today for Senghor, that we are singing for J.J. Rawlings, for him too. He should not end up like Thomas Sankara. When systems are built, they protect the future. But when individuals remain, what happens? The moment you are not, everything scatters. Just like there is a parable that says that when the shepherd is killed or destroyed, it's not, the sheep scatters. So we need to tighten things for Africa, build institutions based on values and systems, not on individuals, because when we build on individuals, we end up destroying the future. So I think that that's the solution that we need for Africa right now. We need to reconstitute our institutions to fit the kind of future that we want, to hold the values that we want, to hold, in fact, to represent the kind of systems that we want. Because look at it, we have terrible systems that have been put in place right now, surrounded by individuals. When an individual has right, I want to use Cameroon, individuals are respected more than the institutions. An individual is a god when we claim that we are in a democracy. We are not in a monarchy. And so those are some of the things that we need to look into and make sure that we build a future for Africa that will permit those that are coming after to not need to stress their minds. Let them not be the Evolu, but let them be Africans. Let them gain their identity and build like Africans. You see what Traoré is doing? He's even struggling to symbols. He wants to change them. For example, even dressings, he wants to change them. So those are some of the things that I think we need to do. That's building systems based on values. And I want to say that if Africa wants to make a difference, if we want to regain our identity, then we must build based on who we are, not based on what we think some people brought to us. No, we must be based on who we are. And that's what will make the difference for us.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. I just want to conclude, but Metro Election Debate, there's an issue which many viewers are pressuring us to talk about, and which has to do with President Bia's stay abroad. And I just want to highlight that under the Cameroon Constitution, the presidential vacancy is declared only in case of death, resignation, of permanent incapacity due to duly ascertained by the Constitutional Council. Metro Alex, is there any comment on that before we conclude?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's very important. I don't know of any constitution in the Western world that gives a number of days that the president cannot be in his country. But however, I've checked the constitution in France. There's nothing like that. But a president cannot spend up to that time out of the country. Why? Because they have a democratic system of accountability. If you're not out of the country, the press are there, the opposition are there. So you cannot even spend even 2 days because it's a system. I've looked at the British Constitution again. There's nothing that they can say you cannot leave out of the country for that day. But because the Prime Minister every week, you have to be accountable to the members of parliament every week on Wednesday, so you cannot stay out of the country. I've looked at the American Constitution too. So it's not about whether the law says. If you are a leader means, I'm not a leader in that country. A leader means every day you go to the market, you talk to the people. The new Prime Minister of United Kingdom, early morning he was with homeless people. He was with a man cooking in homeless people there. He was there. He spends his time talk to the people. That is leadership. You don't need a law.
Okay,
law cannot cover, law cannot cover everything in the country. But it is absolute. Mr. Louis, you are working in African media. In 30 days, go out, they don't know where you are. What will happen? They will sack you.
Sure.
So
all right.
Mr. Biya will be sacked.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need a law for that. I see people write an article, oh, Mr. Biya, there's no law. No, you don't need a law. You're working there. You know your working days. If you are not there, automatically you are sacked. I wrote in 2024 that there's a vacancy. It's not today. It's not about Mr. Biya. If you're incapacitated, it doesn't mean. Boris Johnson was incapacitated in the UK during COVID. He handed power temporarily to somebody and went for whatever he was sick of. George W. Jr. Bush was incapacitated temporarily in America and he handed over to somebody. Ronald Reagan was incapacitated temporarily, went to the hospital. So what I'm telling you, Mr. Biya is incapacitated. We should not be ashamed.
All right.
I've never heard in the I've never heard in my lifetime that Mr. Biya has been sick. He's the most wonderful people on earth. All of us, we are younger than Mr. Biya, but we have been sick. Mr. Biya is the only person that have never been sick. He's Jesus Christ. Thank you very much.
All right, Metro Alex Debate, thank you. Mama Eileen, do any comments on that, just briefly, as we conclude?
Luis, I want to say that this is what they call banana republics. Unfortunately, it's beyond the fact that the president has to go to another country for health care after being in power for over 30 years. Sums up the failure when it comes to, in terms of healthcare. That means that he did nothing. So how about the ordinary Cameroonian? How many of them can afford to go to Switzerland for a month to go and take care of their healthcare? So what's expected? They're supposed to die? The fact that you have been in president for over 30 years and you did nothing to the healthcare system that it can take care of you sums up the failure of your presidency when it comes to healthcare. There's no accountability. Cameroonian, in fact, this government has put a system in place where there's condescendence and mépris. The French word is coming. There's no lack of accountability to the Cameroonian people. The president is out. Nobody comes to give a statement, to give us a state of, we know nothing. They don't give a hoot because there are no consequences. It's the same reason why they changed the constitution at will. They put a prime minister today, remove him tomorrow, put this because they have. And I'm calling on the Cameroonian people to take matters into their own hands. Ultimately, power belongs to the people. The people in Cameroon are supreme, and the people in Africa are supreme. Democracy means power to the people. Power by the people. What the people want is what that goes. The people need to take their responsibility into their hands. Stand up, engage, become involved, run for, I hope Professor McAntony, who is very brilliant, is going to run for office. Run for office. Run for as a municipal person, run for office, be engaged so that we can throw these people out. These people that have no this thing for their people, So that's what I'm going to end. I'm calling on all Africans. All Africans become engaged. You can be engaged. We see in Burkina Faso, I see the grandmother who took her money to buy 1 bag of cement to go and donate. so that they can build a road that that's what we need to do. Everybody needs to become involved, engage, and they will be unable to change the constitution the way they want to, because they're going to meet a strong opposition that is going to vote against, that is going to say no, and they will not be able to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ma Marilyn Dua. Professor Magatoni, briefly, your comments.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to add on this idea of presidential stay out. Like Martin Zive actually said, there's no constitutional provision that determines how long the president stays out, but there are consequences to every act. What the president is doing simply implies that if I am working in a particular ministry or under a particular enterprise or company, I can leave from there, stay out to any length of time that I want, then I come back and I will not have any problem. This is to make us understand that the government of Cameroon is not accountable to the people, which is a crime in itself when it comes to democracy. Accountability is very important. When the government is not accountable to the people, they can do anything, and that's why when they come to talk to us, they speak with impunity. I went through the letter that was, or should I call it a message, using the letterhead of the Minister of Higher Education that Professor Famendongo actually came out and spoke. You see, I felt disappointed, considering the fact that he used the letterhead of the Ministry of Higher Education to present some points that I think were insultive to the people of Cameroon. Irrespective, Cameroon is not an electronic country where the president needs to rule through electronic means. We need him physically, and even if there is something, there is need for continuous updates so that we should know the state of our president. Cameroonians should not be kept in darkness. And when some people want to complain, you rush to come and defend. That's wrong. That's not helping the nation. Rather, you are causing the people to start having more ideas. So I think accountability is very, very important so that people's hearts can be down. It's very important.
All right, thank you very much. Accountability, and we had time to talk about African constitutions, whether they are safeguards to democracy or weapons in the hands of incumbents. That's what we had time to discuss today on the program, the Pan-African Debate. Thank you very much, Professor Maka Kumba-Mantoni. It was a pleasure having you on the program. Metro Alex Nzive, thank you very much for being there on the program. Ma Marilyn Dua, thank you very much. We also had Dr. Eddie Eric, who are part of the program. And those of you who are watching us, we also say thank you very much, and we invite you to stay with more programs on Afrique Media. Until we meet again to discuss more important issues, bye-bye for now. Stay with us.